Welcome, travelers, to my realm of nightmares. Allow me to be your personal assistant. Come in, take a seat, get comfortable. For when you step into my realm, there's no stepping out.
My good friend Danny Dreadful did a phenomenal job with the narration, and she was kind enough to make the FAQ and inventory selection look incredibly cool. You can hear it on YouTube, her podcast, and Spotify. Hey everyone, I can't believe the overwhelming response to my last post. When I started this thread, I didn't expect anyone to read it. I just thought it'd be one of those cool things for if I disappeared. You know, one of those documentaries where the only leads are the victim's strange blogs. But then, it's so strange. Most people think it's a hoax. When that Danny Dreadful chick wanted to narrate it, I thought she was joking. But considering 90% of you think it's fiction, I suppose it makes more sense. I'm not offended if it helps spread the word. Besides, pretty cool to hear your own words done up all fancy, and she has a great voice. Anyway, the reason I'm back is because I have a sequel for you. I did it. I went to the mirror world and want to share new information. Thankfully, we can get right to the point this time. If you haven't read my first post, go check it out or you'll be completely lost. Since I intended to share this experience, I took a tape recorder, but it wouldn't even turn on. Yes, I know there's a whole no electronics thing, but there has to be a limit there. Well, so I thought, but it's a theory in progress. The point is, I will endeavor to record this experience in its entirety, regardless of that setback. Beforehand, I tried to think of all that could go wrong. Never trust yourself to think clearly in a pinch. As a result, I wrapped red duct tape around my left arm rather than a traditional band. It sounds like any color will work, but for a detail so simple, why risk it? I almost took a gun, but thought better of it when plagued by images of a warped, pistol-toting reflection. I wasn't positive that's what would happen, but again, not worth it. Even so, I was hesitant to go defenseless. In the end, I settled for leaving a broken taser next to a circle. Filling a pack with basic survival supplies was common sense, but also vital. The full inventory is listed at the end. As for who I played with, I brought along my bestie. We met in kindergarten, and she's the closest thing that I have to a sibling. All my life, I've been somewhat of a screw-up, but Jess is the responsible one. She's been adulting at a pro level since we were 16. Obviously, when I approached her about this whole affair, she thought I was joking, or having one of my episodes. But eventually, she came to understand I wouldn't settle down until it was out of my system. Ever the loyal friend, she played along as we gathered supplies, and only when I informed her of our location did she falter. I had to explain it to her several times, but eventually she acquiesced, eager to get it over with. If you understand the game, the logic is simple. Mom started in her quaint little neighborhood, which equaled a demolished slum hole in Mirrorwood. Side note, the name Mirror World kinda sucks, so I hope you don't mind, but I've taken to calling it Mirrorwood. Following that logic, doesn't it seem feasible one might find a better entry point by placing their mirrors in a less homely location? That's why I booked a room at the motel on 6th Street. I had unusual difficulties communicating the desires to rent nightly instead of hourly, but these were preparations worth extra effort. I couldn't begin to guess how long my trip would take, but interruptions were unacceptable. Eventually, my credit card ended the discussion. I'm fairly certain no one saw us lugging the big mirrors inside, but if they did, they've probably seen stranger things around there. The setup was easy after that. With the taser in place, I presented a list of rules to Jess. They were typed bullet points, laminated and everything, answering any questions she was liable to have in simple terms. For anyone who wishes to use it, a revised copy is at the end, or a PDF is available upon request. Ignoring her mockery of my bulky attire, I tried to review the rules aloud once more. After I left, she would be forced to accept accordingly, but I wanted her to at least grasp the basics. Bouncing off the mirror 3 times didn't help either, but on the 4th try, I was rewarded by the sound of beautifully dying laughter. I fell to my knees from the sheer shock of it. Not only was the cold enough to steal your breath, but the whole experience left a dizzying sensation. Several minutes passed before I felt steady enough to stand, but I couldn't dawdle. Now that I was in the lobby, the clock was ticking. As imagined, Jess wore a shocked expression that filled me with a warming satisfaction. One last time, I warned her, "Please mind the instructions. She really is coming," before removing my pack to free the skateboard. Every second mattered, and while I hadn't used it much since high school, a few weeks of practice did wonders. I soared down the infinite corridor in absolute wonder, waiting for a click of an opening door to reveal the exit. Enough time had passed by to make me wonder if I missed something, but finally it happened. Coming to a less than graceful stop, I turned to face my reflection. I feel like I can be real with you guys. It was trippy as fuck. She wasn't me. I know real words can never convey the actual emotions illustrated by such an encounter, but every basic instinct screamed, "This is not okay." I almost talked to her. All my mental preparations vanished when the moment of truth came, and it almost ruined me before even leaving the lobby. When she was sure I wouldn't speak, Flexion Chick broke the silence. "Welcome. I'm so glad you made it. From the moment you found your mother's journal, I knew it was only a matter of time." She grinned slightly wider than natural, giving my face an unsettling appearance. But she also spoke like an old friend. It really did make me want to talk. I had 1,000 questions. "Oh, come now. We don't have to worry about all those silly rules. You aren't here to play the game. You're here to learn, right?" She was so convincing, I wanted to believe her. But I guess that's the whole point. "Ah, you think I'm lying. Well, I can't blame you for being cautious. Go ahead then. I certainly won't try to stop you. We can talk after you've poked around." If nothing else, she was polite. But I couldn't help noticing that she skated towards Jess. Oh, and for the record, I took the skateboard as proof that bringing a gun would be unfortunate. Alone again, I took a deep breath before proceeding. The open door held nothing but impenetrable darkness, and I kept a healthy distance while accessing my own on the opposite side. A cold knob turned easily beneath my hand, and light spilled into the dim corridor. As I passed through, both doors could be heard shutting behind me. The hotel was almost exactly as hoped. Suddenly, I was in a lavish, swanky room, and although no evil old guy awaited my arrival, there was a beautiful woman. She wore a black evening gown, and her hairdo looked expensive as hell, but I couldn't stop looking at her ridiculous shoes. They looked like Dorothy's red ruby slippers were turned into stilettos. "Good evening. Would you care for a drink?" she asked, leaning against the bar and sipping a cocktail. I know it's silly to point out, but she had her pinky extended. That says a lot about a person, human or not. Endlessly, I've debated if speaking to one of those is allowed, but I couldn't make myself test the theory. This game doesn't exactly come with extra lives. For the time being, it'll remain a mystery. Regardless, she couldn't be trusted. While keeping her in sight, I scanned the room for my taser. "Looking for this?" She stepped aside to reveal an obviously new taser placed atop the bar, and I stared angrily. "It'll take a lot more to make waves around here." She was picking at her nails and sounded bored. My inner smartass was in complete turmoil, itching, begging to be freed, but I bit my tongue until it bled to keep all witty retorts inside. Did you know the clever ones break the hardest? It's because they're so sure of themselves. She sighed happily as recalling fond memories, and I began to squirm under her penetrating gaze. Riding the taser off, I began inching towards the exit, ready to run if she advanced a single step. Are you trying to be stealthy in your attempt to reach the door? You needn't be. Violence is beneath my station. Besides, I haven't finished my cocktail yet. With that, she turned her back to me and resumed drinking. I kept her in my sights while creeping closer to the exit, and only when outside, with the door firmly shut, did I look away. At first glance, the parking lot appeared void of life, but I was doubtful of the assessment. Before, several blocked-up cars littered the street, but now there was an assortment of lovely options. I hoped to have a weapon before the stage, but there was still no sign of life, so I skated to the closest vehicle. It was a Mustang, and I was only a few feet away when the shrill barking, exclusively to chihuahuas, filled my ears. The three-legged beast raced towards me, tongue lolling behind in a stream of foam. I tried jumping onto the car, but the mutt caught my ankle and pulled me backwards. Luckily, it was small, and a single kick propelled it far, but the creature wanted more. Quickly, I shed my outer layer and held it up like a matador. When it all leapt, I used a coat to pin it down. Heart hammering, I fought desperately to end the incessant barking, terrified of what attention it might draw. Once blissful silence was restored, I realized the larger problem. What to do next, zombified or not, the idea of killing a dog was too unsettling. A car was right there, and plenty more to choose from. I scooped the deformed runt into a ball and tossed the bundle inside, but the coat was a lost cause. Thankfully, all my layers had duct tape, including my skin, and I assure you, the pain of removal was completely worth the reassurance. The mongrel emerged from its wrapping like an angry hornet and resumed barking. At the sight of its beady, red eyes, I fled to the next vehicle with renewed motivation for locating a weapon. My ankle could wait for attention. It felt sore, but I knew the skin was unbroken. The dogs in Mom's journal were the main reason I wore steel-toed combat boots, 2 layers of socks, and 3 pairs of pants. At a BMW, I learned that anything with a computer chip wouldn't crank. The electronics thing got me again. To be fair, I suspected it was too good to be true when the keys were in the ignition. But I digress. It wasn't a total loss. Found a tire iron in a trunk and confirmed my ankle was whole, if bruised. Next, I chose an older model Saturn, but of course, the keys were nowhere in sight. That meant it was time to look for a clue. A hide-a-key box beneath the bumper would be too easy, but I had to check anyway. Finally, I noticed the parking space was labeled "Reserved for C. Perkins," and sat across from Pierce and Perkins' law office. Gripping my meager weapon tightly, I crossed the street, wary for sounds of pursuit. Opening the door slowly, I hoped to remain silent, but cringed with terror when a bell chimed above my head. Seriously though, who the hell uses a physical bell anymore? The entrance was a reception area with a hallway on the left and desks on the right. Sounds of movement in the back stirred me to action, and I dove from sight just as footsteps entered the room. The sounds of a stiff yawn confused me at first, but then I remembered something else from Mom's journal. The Mirror Master said his pets were nocturnal, and most of them were sleeping. Side note, the name Mirror Master also sucks. Henceforth, I'll refer to him as the boss. I was blind behind the desk as the footsteps drew closer, and for the first time, I became genuinely frightened. All the smug surety that enveloped me evaporated the instant those shoes stopped next to my hiding place. There was no room to swing. but I positioned the tire iron for a jab. Any hopes I had for not being discovered was dashed when the thing sniffed the air in deep, grunting breaths, like it smelled me. Willing myself not to scream when the inevitable head appeared, I waited. But decaying, spindling fingers came first. They were covered in dirt, with jagged nails, and curled around the desktop's edge. I almost panicked and struck my head, but controlled myself a moment longer. A slight whimper escaped my lips when greasy strands of black hair dangled into view, and tiny bugs could be seen crawling through it, nesting. The thing's breaths were growing heavier as if excited to find me, and I thought my heart would fail. When the face was finally before me, I didn't aim my strike. The fact the tire iron went through an eye socket was a 1 in a million lucky hit that would never happen again, but it saved my life. I was frozen in place by shock and awe as the corpse slumped forward and fell heavily to the ground. Fluids leaked from more than its head as I tried to crawl around it, but the stench seeped into my clothing and was there to stay. Standing up, my knees felt weak, but I had to keep moving. Too much time was wasted, and I still needed keys. Down the hall were 3 doors. One was a bathroom, and the other 2 were labeled with nameplates. I didn't dare open Pierce's office, but Mr. Perkins had a set of keys in his desk drawer. Still fearing his partner, I left quietly without further delay. Outside, I was dismayed to see the sun had definitely made progress crossing the sky. It was almost at its highest point. Not having a way to track time was the hardest part. I highly recommend learning to use a sundial before making this journey. I'm learning on YouTube. Hearing the Saturn roar to life instilled me with a proud sense of accomplishment, and the fear from minutes before was now forgotten. Now maybe you're wondering, where would your boss fight be if you didn't want to wish? I wondered that myself during the weeks of preparation, and after considering several possibilities, a school seemed to be the best bet. I didn't want to repeat my mom's mistakes, so instead of making the long drive to the university, I decided to try the much closer community college. Of course, if I guessed wrong, I wasn't going to risk a second location. I fully intended to be home long before it got dark. The road conditions were pretty decent for the first few miles. If I drove in the center, but then the potholes grew as the pavement shrank. I knew what was coming next, but couldn't let myself panic. 3 miles away from the college, I was met with a roadblock. The barricade had a road closed sign in the center and a detour sign pointing left. Now, keeping in mind, the directions are reversed in Merward. The only thing to the left was the river, but I didn't see any problem with the road ahead. Besides, the roads were shit everywhere. But this was the first time any notice was given. Suspicious, right? Getting past the barricade required driving onto the sidewalk, which put me extremely close to a cluster of antique shops. I was scraping by with barely an inch to spare when glass suddenly exploded next to my face. I reflectively punched the gas and the car surged forward. At the sight of more creepy fingers collapsing the window's frame, I slammed onto the brakes and cried in relief when a severed hand fell limply onto the pavement. Behind me, 2 zombies were approaching fast, one clearly the hand's owner. I dove back into the car, eyes locked forward, and steered around the worsening road conditions while trying not to panic at the loss of my window. Aside from the obvious cuts to my arm, I felt a few more on my face and neck. At the next intersection, I parked in the center and carefully removed the shards from my skin. Luckily, nothing warranted wasting time with the first aid kit. The moment I feared came 1 block away from the college. The road was destroyed, leaving only a narrow path in the center, and I could already see things moving in the ditch to the right. The sun was officially at its highest point, and the image of an hourglass was brandished into my mind. I was torn between speeding across, which, you seem like a smart group, so I'm sure I don't need to explain the risks there, or continue my slow and steady pace. Before you condemn my actions, let me remind you, my driver's side window was nearly shattered, and my only weapon was a tire iron, that I was already pushing my luck with. Do you see why I might feel the extra push towards the final sprint? Just one more left turn, and I'd meet the boss. Well, I don't mind telling you, it was a fucking disaster. Anyways, always choose slow and steady, but what's done is done. While lining up for a straight shot, I envisioned several zombie creatures emerging too late to matter. I didn't anticipate their movements to be burrowing, but had it gone a little slower, I might have noticed the cracks spreading through the road before it crumbled beneath me. The airbag broke my nose, and the car was totaled, but no bones were broken, and I missed the long drop by a few feet. At the sound of an approaching horde, I clambered out of the window and up the opposite embankment. A car door was ripped open just as I made it to the top, but I dared not look back. Tears blurred my vision as I sprinted between the vape shop and a liquor store. But on the other side lay sweet victory. Wiping my face, I scanned the area patiently before emerging from a dark corner, but the low growl came from behind me. It wasn't the sound of a chihuahua this time. It was the sounds of a larger, undoubtedly zombified dog. Never try to outrun animals, they'll always win. Instead, I leapt atop a dumpster and screamed when it shook with the animal's collision. This time, there was room to swing. I really didn't want to, but I focused on its yellow, third eye, snake-like tongue, and foaming mouth as I did what was necessary. Black blood sprayed with every strike, and I cried apologies with each impact. Killing dead people was one thing, but I hoped to avoid the animals. A cat very well may be the death of me in the next game. My nose was swollen. I could see it from the corner of my eye, and the visual obstruction bothered me more than the pain or mouth breathing. Mom escaped with a few scratches, and here I was, not even at the halfway point, and barely standing. I entered college without further confrontation, but the sun was moving at an uncomfortable rapid pace. Once inside, I was able to use my skateboard and help myself to a protein bar. I wasn't completely sure where the boss would be, but if I didn't find him after a single pass-through, I'd be forced to leave anyway. There wasn't time for a second location. There wasn't even time to get home if I didn't find a vehicle close by. That's when my reflection decided to show her face. She waited for me at the bottom of the stairwell, and I felt foolish for not expecting her. You look like shit. I mean, I know this place can be rough, but I honestly expected better from you. I glared in anger as she looked over me, but she was blocking the steps, and I didn't want to get too close. You made decent time. But at what cost? Do you understand you ruined our nose? No, of course you don't. You never cared how we look. I'm not sure if that display was part of her act, but all I experienced Morward, Flexion Bitch, was unquestionably the most terrifying. I don't pretend to understand the boss. Maybe he's a demon, or wizard, or something else entirely. But there's nothing more dangerous than an enemy who knows you. You're more intelligent than most of the livestock. Fine, bravo. But you're missing the bigger picture. I am too. We're the same. We should be working together. I raised an eyebrow at that and scolded myself for letting her see my curiosity. If she thought I would agree to a timeshare, she was delusional. But it's more likely she was simply stalling, a point I communicated via glancing out a nearby window. She understood the gesture and replied accordingly. You think I'm stalling now? Fine. You're going upstairs next. Great. I'll go ahead just to listen while we walk. I was hesitant to follow her anywhere, but I had to go up regardless. As long as I stayed a few yards back, I could diverge past when needed. I can't read your mind. I know it seems like it, but it's only because we are the same. Everyone in your world has a counterpart here, and they're all the same people, living in different realities. Obviously, your world is far more pleasant, which means we tend to grow bitter on this side. We can see everything you do through mirrors. Every time you look into one, I'm staring back. But what you don't see is how I'm still there after you look away. It's the same for all of us. She knew she had my attention, but I didn't understand why she removed a flag from the wall. It was one of the shorter kinds that sit in a basket. I raised my tire iron in defense as she snapped the pole over her knee, but the makeshift spear wasn't for me. It was for the zombie exiting a nearby classroom. I can't stand interruptions, and we're almost there, so listen close. You'll never learn everything in this one visit. Not without making a wish. And if you die, I die. Your little friend isn't easy to fool either, meaning I have a proposition. I'll help you get home, but in exchange, I want you to do some research before returning. It's amazing how hard it is to stay silent once you're in the middle of a conversation, but I managed. As we climbed another flight of stairs, I almost wish she could read my mind. That's how badly I wish to communicate my offense. If she knew so much, she should be aware of the limited knowledge available in Merwood. My ignorance wasn't a result of laziness. For months, I interviewed every source I could find. I see by your indignant expression that you misunderstand. Again, you see the end of the hall? The boss is inside. The door she indicated was labeled Dean, and before stepping away, she retrieved a folded piece of paper from her pocket. You didn't know where to look. Put this somewhere safe. It's a list of books you'll find helpful. I know you don't believe me yet, but you will. I won't bother you again for this trip. Call it a show of good faith. But when you leave here, use the faculty parking exit. If you take a left at the bottom of the stairs on the first floor, you'll go straight to it. A blue car will be waiting, but this will still be the hardest part. Shocked? Doesn't begin to describe how I felt at the moment. Don't get me wrong, it's not like I trusted her, but even if she was playing a long con, it still meant she had to help me home this time because I was in bad shape. With a long way to go, if she's willing to let me pass unmolested, well, I didn't really have a choice in the matter. When she was well out of sight, I shoved her note into my pocket before opening the boss door. The room was well lit, and the boss was sitting at a large oak desk. Since arriving in Merward, so much had happened that I forgot about his appearance. I couldn't help but giggle at the sight. I honestly cannot decide if I liked or loathed you, but now I'm leaning towards loathe. How can someone who thinks so highly of herself be so immature? Oh, he was disgusted, but I didn't care. That was the closest to a real-life Spider-Man I would ever get. You guys keep saying that. Do I really come across as that conceited? I always thought myself humble. But it was such a relief to speak. Absolutely. Now, get on with it. What do you want? Make a wish and get out. I do not relish this form. He examined his costume, and a careless movement sent webs flying across the office. I felt like I could die happy. Oh, I thought you knew. I don't want anything. I just came to, check this place out. I couldn't help but stare at my feet. Even through the mask, his gaze felt like 1,000 eyes. You are a complete imbecile. The polite but firm tone vanished, and only malice remained. It frightened me so badly, I almost blurted out a wish for money. Instead, I inched towards the door while apologizing. You're absolutely right. I'm very sorry for wasting your valuable time. I'll let myself out. Obviously, that didn't work. I strongly recommend reconsidering your actions, child. To think I respected your mother. How such a brat came here. I shudder at the thought. He screamed hard enough for spit to fly through the mask, and I froze in place. You'll get no argument from me, I tried. Silence. You want to learn, you say. Fine. Let's try a mental exercise, shall we? You've read your mother's words. You were surprised by my friendly demeanor. Perhaps, due to my reputation, you envisioned a vile creature, but then My charming grace led you to believe different. Am I close? A simple nod will suffice. Close enough anyway. I nodded affirmation with my mouth slightly agape. Excellent. Now, based on how things turned out for your mother, a woman I was amused by, how do you suppose your story might end, you disrespectful brat? It's just, I'm sure I'm wrong. Sorry again, but, your endgame seems to be getting a soul. And I thought since you went to all this trouble of the elaborate setup, that maybe you couldn't just take one. Besides, most legends agree that souls are a free will thing. It's been a long time since someone like you has come along. Do you know what your problem is? It's youth. You young ones always have these tiny, insignificant epiphanies, and you're so pleased with yourselves, you fail to see anything beyond that simple fact. You are correct. To an extent. I cannot take your soul by force, but I can do quite literally anything else. The mask suddenly conformed to his face beneath, and the terror was indescribable. Mom saw fangs, but she didn't see the twisted shape of his ears, the long slant to his eyes, or his lack of nose. As he closed the gap between us, the mask began to fade entirely, so that by the time our faces were inches apart, the only thing I saw was his pasty, bluish-gray skin. His breath was cold and visible as he spoke. I feel hungry today, so I'll give you one last chance. Do you want to make a wish, or do you want to die? I knew without a shred of doubt he was serious. For all my planning, I overlooked the most obvious detail. My intentions had never mattered. The game is still the game. Worst of all, he was right about me. I was so proud, so busy patting myself on the back, I missed everything else. I nodded vigorously without knowing what I'd wished for. But the moment I did, Spider-Man stood behind the desk once more. Rotten brat, take a look outside. It's getting dark much faster than usual. You'll be lucky to make it out alive. Well then, spit it out. He was screaming again. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you all to know I fully believed I would die here. No matter how I looked at it, there was no way out. My game was over, and soon Jess would open that horrible note in the sock drawer. It wasn't a matter of selflessness, but it was now so dark outside, there was no point in me wishing for anything for myself. I want Jess to have a long, happy, normal life, and to live as if I never dragged her through this. I want her to follow the instructions I left and move on peacefully. You saw that movie, didn't you? He asked blindly. What? Huh? Don't play dumb. You thought a selfish wish would negate the deal, didn't you? His tone was extremely accusatory, and frankly offensive. Holy shit, does it? No. And give me the contract. As you pointed out, I'm in a hurry. I'm a sore loser, I'll admit, but I thought he was stalling me with false hope. Turns out, he was talking about some really old movie called Bedazzled, but that's not important since it had absolutely no bearing on my situation. A thick scroll appeared in his hand, and with a snap of his fingers, it unrolled into a pile at his feet. A quill suddenly manifested in his other hand, and remembering the blood signature, I extended my finger. Tensed and waited for the jab, I watched in slow motion as his arm darted forward, and the sharp tip made contact with the soft pad of my finger. Nothing happened. Once again, the Spider-Man facade vanished, but I struggled to stifle a laugh at the confused expression left in its place. The boss was no longer towering above me, but hunched over my finger in an utter state of dismay. 3 more times he jabbed my finger with increasing strength and speed, yet nothing happened.
What are you? Why does your existence plague me?
His anger returned with the briefest glance at my smile, and all fears of laughing were gone. What do you mean? What? I'm obviously human. You? I was just as confused as he was. It was a shame we didn't have time to discuss it.
Get out! Out, you damn heathen!
He yelled while shooing me away. I was moving, I assure you. When he said those words, my paralysis was over. There was hardly any light remaining, and I had more questions than when I came. But all that mattered was leaving. I turned left on the first floor and didn't have time to wonder if it was a trap. Doors were opening all around me, and nothing good was coming out of them. I was skating down a long hall and saw the exit at the end, but there were several more classrooms to pass. My legs began to shake, and I almost fell over twice, but only seconds remained before I would be surrounded. Finally, as I burst through the last door standing between me and freedom, a hand grabbed the back of my shirt and pulled. The skateboard rolled away and was never seen again. Before I could catch my breath, the hand lifted me in the air, and my feet dangled above the ground. Pretending to swing the tire iron, I pulled my arm from its sleeve, which is why you never button up, and fell back to the ground. I rolled a comical distance before daring to rise, but the blue car was immediately noticeable. I tried not to let hope carry me away. It was still likely a trap, but it was my only option. There were no others to choose from, and zombies were still closing in fast. This time, the keys were in the ignition, and it cranked. There was also a gas mask in the passenger seat with a note that said, "Wear me or die." So, I wore it. Then, I took it off because I couldn't see jack shit, but I kept it handy. Remembering the road destruction on the way in, I took a longer route back, but along the way, I found no more opposition. It was like the zombies were on strike. Several buildings were in flames, and I thought for sure they were ambushes, but I passed each one without incident. Just when my hopes began to rise, I pulled into the motel to see 3 giant zombie dogs. I had to run over 2 before the third fled, but I parked as close as possible to the entrance. Done with the driving portion of the game, I put the strange gift on once more and entered. The whole place was filled with a thick, white smoke. Regardless what it was, the mask surely saved me. No one confronted me on the way to my room, but the beautiful lady was waiting with a mask of her own. It's interesting she would need one, but she was furious at my appearance. Apparently, violence was no longer beneath her station, and she made one hell of a scary sight in that big mask and elegant gown. In her anger, she charged at me, and I jumped over the couch to reach my taser. I turned to meet her, and heard the satisfying zaps of contact when it connected with her midsection. She fell to the floor with a heavy thud, and immediately a choir of doors erupted outside. More were coming. There was no hesitation in my sprint to the exit. I dove into the lobby and slammed the door behind me, cutting off all sounds of pursuit. The cold of the infinite corridor hit me like a punch to the gut, but I was so grateful it didn't matter. Struggling with each painful step, I began my long, wheelless trudge to the mirror. It felt like an eternity before Jess was finally in view, but once she was, a new burst of energy surged through me. I ran the rest of the way, holding my right arm up to point at the red tape. You won't be surprised to hear she was furious with me, more so since hearing my side of things. It would have been wise to edit out a few details, but she can always tell when I'm lying, and I was too eager to share anyway. I would also like to take this time to thank all of you as well. It is an honor to share this with your community. As for the note from my reflection, it was a short message followed by a list of reading materials and where to find them. I do not think it's wise to reveal the list. Some of the texts are dangerous, but I will copy the rest below. I'm sure you'll be equally confused by the contents as myself. What you know is incomplete. Do not return until you learn the rest. I could not tell you more before your meeting with the Master, but now you will understand the truth. It makes no sense, but I'm going to find these books and keep you updated. I do not recommend anyone playing the Infinity game for any reason, but if you do, please be safe. Below are the FAQs and inventory list I previously mentioned. Or comment with your email if you'd like the PDFs. Until next time, friends. FAQs. Where the hell did you go? I told you, Murad. Now, grow a pair and stand firm. Why are you back so soon? If the tape is on the left, it's not me. Don't move. She can't hurt you. If the tape is on the right, move. I'm in a hurry. Does it really know the future? I don't know, but it's irrelevant. It'll say anything. You suck. Why would you do this to me? Think of the other prospects. That's why. How do I contact you? It's an emergency. You seriously can't. If you leave the circle, I'm dead. If you have to leave anyway, destroy the mirrors first. Why did the mirrors suddenly shatter? I'm dead. Sorry. Destroy the second one immediately, then seek further instructions in my sock drawer. I have to pee. Without leaving the circle or touching the mirror, retrieve the bucket hidden behind the silver one. Sorry again. How long is this going to take? No clue, but at least several hours. Don't try to hold it. Just use the bucket. Something else is coming. What do I do? Break the mirror and save yourself. I'm already doomed. Full inventory. Never take something you can't lose to afford. Skateboard. Straps easily to the outside. Protein bars and water. Matches. First aid. Paracord bracelet. Compass. Gorilla glue. Screwdriver. Pocket knife. Gloves. Goggles. Face mask. And eye drops. Tonight's story is part 2 of Paige Turner's Infinity game series. And if you enjoyed this, please let her know, and let her know PA sent you. Hey, did you have merch? Well, I do. Crazy, right? And if you like to walk around, representing my realm and gaining new travelers, the links to my merch store as well as all my other social medias will be in the description below. As always, I'd like to say a special thank you to all my lovely Patreons. 242 Reads, Seraphine, the Midnight Bard, Rando Calrissian, Creepy Clown Girl, Hair Raising Narratives, Spooky Boo, Scary Story Time, Lycan Trucker, and Pimp Demon. If you'd like to join these lovely travelers but are lighting my fire, you can do so by becoming a Patreon as well. Just remember, support is always appreciated, but is never expected. Please don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, ding that bell for all future content if you're new. As it will really help push this video into the algorithm and helps this channel grow.
But as always, travelers, once you step into my realm, there's no stepping